Have you ever wondered what would happen to our world if countries possessing nuclear weapons engaged in a war and used their full potential? In 2019, scientists at Princeton University developed a possible apocalypse scenario. In this scenario, a war starting between Western European countries and Russia was modeled. Predictions suggested that everything would begin with the bombing of major cities. A significant portion of the population of European capitals such as Warsaw, Prague, and Berlin would vanish instantly. In retaliation, the US would launch nuclear missiles at Moscow and St. Petersburg. Subsequently, countries like China, North Korea, France, India, Pakistan, and the United Kingdom, which officially confirmed their nuclear weapon stockpiles, would also join the war. This scenario was named Plan A, and its purpose was to demonstrate the devastation such a war would cause. Throughout history, there have been many instances where the world has come close to a nuclear conflict. But what would have happened if such a war had indeed taken place? August 6th and 9th, 1945, stand as some of the most horrific days in human history. On these dates, the US Air Force dropped 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the final stages of World War II. In Hiroshima alone, approximately 214,000 people perished. Yet, another city could have experienced this calamity. The pilot of the plane that dropped the little boy atomic bomb on Hiroshima claimed that the US government had planned more bombings. According to him, 10 more bombers had been prepared even before the attacks on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as Americans didn't anticipate Japan's swift surrender. The official start of the American nuclear weapons program, named the Manhattan Project, began on August 13, 1942. The scientific head of the project was American theoretical physicist Robert Oppenheimer. The program aimed to develop a deadly nuclear weapon industry. On July 16, 1945, the first nuclear test, named Trinity, was conducted in the New Mexico desert. They were testing a plutonium bomb named Gadget, and the outcome excited the scientists, as the explosion was several times more potent than expected. Shortly after Trinity, the military leader of the Manhattan Project, General Leslie Groves, suggested that they might need to drop 3 bombs instead of 2. So, which Japanese city was the target for the third bomb? Initially, the third bomb was planned to be dropped on August 19, 1945. It would have been similar to the Fat Man bomb dropped on Nagasaki, with Tokyo as the first target. However, many of Tokyo's industrial facilities had already been bombed multiple times, and large residential areas had been destroyed. Therefore, the US began evaluating less damaged areas. Potential targets after Tokyo included major Japanese cities like Yokohama, Kagoshima, Niigata, and Fukuoka. Kyoto, the ancient capital of Japan, remained mostly untouched during World War II and would have been an effective choice for showcasing the bomb's impact. However, at this point, U.S. Secretary of War Henry Stimson intervened, trying to convince President Truman not to bomb Kyoto. Why did Stimson do this? Not out of a desire to save millions of lives, but because he had spent his honeymoon in Kyoto and had grown fond of the city, a somewhat tragicomic story, isn't it? Fortunately, Japan surrendered after the first 2 bombs, and such an event never transpired. What if America had dropped 3 bombs? In a scenario where Stimson convinced Truman, the bomb would likely have been dropped on Tokyo. On the night of August 19, 1945, a bomber carrying a deadly payload would take off from an American military base, and a few hours later, the residents of Tokyo would be shaken by a 21-kiloton explosion. Approximately 70,000 people located directly above the blast would die in seconds. In the minutes following the explosion, another 60,000 would be seriously injured and exposed to lethal radiation doses. As a result, about 30% of the city's population would perish. Additionally, since they were located in the capital's center, the Japanese emperor and government officials would likely also lose their lives. If Japan had been hit by 3 atomic bombs, the country might have been set back for centuries. A few weeks after the victory against Nazi Germany, the United States and the United Kingdom began developing military plans to eliminate the Soviet Union. These plans aimed to destroy the communist state with a series of nuclear attacks. The operation's codename was Operation Unthinkable. The Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, posed a significant threat to the United States and England. Considering Stalin's unpredictable nature, the outbreak of a new war seemed quite plausible. According to an archival note from the American Federal Investigation Bureau, British Prime Minister Churchill believed that dropping atomic bombs would make it easier to control the Soviet Union. However, England wasn't the only country planning to use nuclear weapons against Stalin. Documents show that between 1945 and 1949, the US developed 9 plans for a nuclear war against the Soviets. The most famous of these plans was the 1949 Operation Dropshot. According to this operation, the US would target 200 sites in 100 Soviet cities, including Moscow and Leningrad, with at least 300 nuclear bombs and 26,000 tons of conventional bombs. A ground offensive would also be launched to ensure the USSR's complete defeat. According to archives, this war was scheduled to start on January 1, 1957. So what exactly stopped England and the US? Did these countries step back because they valued the lives of millions of people? The answer, again, is no. For many years, the only obstacles were a shortage of atomic bombs and planes. By 1948, Washington's arsenal consisted of 50 atomic bombs and 32 B-29 bombers. However, in 1949, the US produced 250 more nuclear bombs, and Operation Dropshot was set to commence. Then unexpected news shocked the world: the Soviet Union had developed its atomic bomb. While the American military knew the communists' nuclear potential was relatively small, they could not ignore the unknown possibilities. However, in 1960, 12 years after the Dropshot plans, all potential American plans were consolidated into one operation. If this integrated operation had been implemented, simultaneous massive nuclear attacks would have been carried out on the major cities and military facilities in the USSR, China, and Eastern Europe. In a short period, there were plans to execute 3,500 nuclear attacks on these regions. According to American generals, this attack would result in the deaths of between 285 and 425 million people. In fact, this plan could have been implemented during the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962, and that day could have been the last day in human history. The world has never come as close to a nuclear war as it did on October 27. Without realizing what was happening, the Americans decided to secretly send nuclear weapons to the island, resulting in the redeployment of over 40,000 Soviet soldiers and more than 160 nuclear warheads to Cuba. By October 16, John Kennedy had received intelligence about the locations of the Soviet missiles in Cuba. This date is actually considered the beginning of the Cuban Missile Crisis. The primary task of the US president was to avoid mutual nuclear strikes and to get rid of the missiles in Cuba. Therefore, instead of choosing to invade, the president advocated for a blockade of Cuba. However, since a blockade implied war, a milder term, quarantine, was preferred. Yet, at this stage, he was unaware that there was a Soviet submarine carrying nuclear warheads in the Sargasso Sea. Inside the submarine, things were not going well. The temperature inside had risen to critical levels, exceeding 30 degrees Celsius. One of the crew members noted that sailors were fainting one by one due to the heat. Meanwhile, American destroyers were patrolling right above the submarine, making it impossible for the B-59 to surface. During this crisis, a series of explosions suddenly occurred on the submarine. Communication specialist Vadim Orlov described the moments as if someone was continuously hammering the submarine. However, according to the protocol, if American military ships collided with a submarine, they had to drop harmless depth bombs to signal the enemy ship to surface. But that day, someone decided to throw a hand grenade into the water. Captain Switsky, thinking the war had started, ordered his crew to retaliate. On the other hand, the Americans who threw the hand grenades were not aware that B-59 was equipped with a 15-kiloton nuclear warhead. Only a few seconds saved the world from a nuclear war that day. On board the submarine was Soviet Navy Captain Vasili Arkhipov. Arkhipov had previously served on the Ka-19, the first nuclear-powered submarine equipped with nuclear weapons. Therefore, knowing the consequences of nuclear weapons, Arkhipov tried to dissuade the launching of the missiles and succeeded. If it weren't for him, a full-scale nuclear war might have erupted between the United States and the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. If the B-59 had attacked, the United States could have immediately retaliated by launching missiles from Turkey. In response, the Soviet Union would have been compelled to activate its missiles in Cuba. This would lead to the annihilation of not only the Soviet Union and the USA but also Turkey and Cuba. Such a conflict could result in the death of 360 million people. Additionally, the mutual nuclear attacks could release a large amount of radioactive dust into the atmosphere, potentially causing global temperatures to drop several degrees, initiating a nuclear winter. This could be followed by massive famine, leading to the death of nearly half the global population. Thankfully, on that day, the captain of the Soviet submarine did not press the red button. But the world did not learn from this event. 21 years after the Cuban Missile Crisis, on September 26, 1983, the world once again teetered on the brink of a nuclear catastrophe. In the early hours of the morning, an officer named Stanislav Petrov, stationed 100 kilometers from Moscow at a missile detection system command post, received a notification of a U.S. missile attack. The computer indicated that several missiles were heading towards the Soviet Union. Protocol dictated that he should report this immediately, allowing the Soviet military to quickly launch a retaliatory nuclear strike. However, Petrov chose to defy orders and did not immediately report the detection. He double-checked the computer and then contacted a group of satellite radar operators. The operators saw no missiles, but they could be mistaken. Faced with a choice, Petrov had to decide whether to inform the Soviet government of a missile attack or a potential system malfunction. If he had chosen the former, the information would reach the nation's top leaders within minutes, and the Soviet Union would launch a nuclear attack on the United States. If a nuclear war had broken out between the Soviet Union and the USA on that day, several 100 million people worldwide would have perished. Still, Petrov chose to report a glitch in the missile detection system. He was uncertain until the last moment, knowing that if he was wrong, a massive explosion would occur within minutes. Thankfully, no explosion happened, and Stanislav Petrov became the man who saved the world from nuclear war. But that wasn't the last time the world approached Armageddon. On January 25, 1995, the Russian early warning system mistakenly reported the detection of an American ballistic missile off the coast of Norway. President Boris Yeltsin was urgently prepared for nuclear warfare and was about to give the command for a widespread retaliatory strike. Luckily, shortly after, it was discovered that the alert was caused by a research rocket launched to study the Northern Lights. If the button had been pressed that day, Norway would have been wiped off the map, and neighboring countries like Sweden, Finland, and Denmark would be grappling with radiation and nuclear winter for decades. Of course, Russia's nuclear attack would not have gone unanswered, potentially triggering a widespread nuclear war involving China and Europe. Today, due to the war initiated by Russia, Ukraine and Taiwan, under pressure from China, are under the threat of nuclear attack. Another defenseless country against nuclear attacks is Japan, as North Korean missiles are aimed directly at Tokyo. In such a scenario, if all global leaders initiate a full-scale nuclear war and press the red buttons, 4,500 nuclear bombs will be launched. After the bombs explode, approximately 150 million tons of radioactive dust will mix into the air. This dust will block the sun, and the temperature will drop almost 7 degrees Celsius. Scientists believe that just a nuclear war between Russia and the USA would result in the immediate death of over 3 million people. The survivors would then have to grapple with the aftermath of radioactive residue and radiation. Furthermore, agriculture on all continents, except Australia, will be almost entirely destroyed. A global famine would last for over 2 years, leading to the death of more than 5 billion people. And we are talking about a scenario where only half of the global nuclear arsenal is used. Just imagine if all of it were used. In summary, the specter of nuclear warfare has loomed over us for decades. We've come to the brink of annihilation multiple times, narrowly escaping the abyss thanks to the decisions of a few individuals. It's a stark reminder that the choices we make and the technology we wield can shape the destiny of our entire planet. We must always be vigilant, informed, and advocate for peace and understanding among nations. If you found this topic enlightening and think it's a conversation worth having, please give this video a thumbs up. Comment below with your thoughts, questions, or any insights you might have on this critical issue. And if you want to stay updated with more content like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Let's continue to educate and be aware, for the sake of our future. Thank you for watching, and take care.